All right, guys. First of hopefully many. We'll see. I'm just gonna get right into it. We're gonna do these as a live, just because I'm too stupid to figure out how to use Zoom and Streamyard and everything else. But yeah, we're gonna start putting out, as you've been seeing lately. We've been putting out more YouTube content, anyways. We're gonna try to kind of keep that going. So we're gonna try to do 1 to 2 lives a week on here. We wanted a catchy, dumb name, so we're going with GIO Talks instead of Ted, because nobody knows who Ted is. So just thought I'd come on here again, just kind of a sound off. Some of these are topics we speak about on the podcast that I want to either elaborate on a little bit more, just kind of give a little bit more of an unfettered, uncut opinion on. Other stuff is just because, again, I just kind of wanted to, sound off on topics that didn't make the cut. So I thought about going with the name Geo Rants. I think someone just mentioned that in the chat. I certainly would have liked to have done that, but I'm trying to keep this positive. We're all positive these days. So we're going to keep them short, 8 to 10 minutes. We'll kind of work in the chat a little bit as we go. Like I said, though, the overall goal is just to kind of expand the SCN brand and the name. We're going to start adding some guests in as we get this thing going. We'll do some of these will be pre-produced, where we'll have the clips and the different stuff. I just want to try to get this thing off the ground super simple and easy. So we figured we'd just hit go live and do it this way. So first off, a couple things. I'm going to try to start with a card note every time, just like some things that have caught my attention, pop, whatever, things we've broken, personal stuff. So one of each, just to start the show real quick. Then I'll sound off on a couple subjects really quick. I'm not sure if anybody's seen these yet. The Spotlight Spikes. Pretty cool cards out of Panini 3 and 2 Baseball. We pulled that one last night. That's the Ellie De La Cruz. Super short printed cards. Stuff like that, by the way. A guy named Zeppi pulled that for us. Or rather, we pulled that for him. Awesome. Brand new insert that I think is really cool. Stuff like that, though, I think you go right to eBay. Just sell that stuff immediately. But I did like to see that, we've ripped 4 or 5 cases. That's the first one of those we've actually hit. So I thought that was kind of a cool note. But yeah, I wouldn't get caught up in it. That's something to me you just sell right away. And then I had a nice one come back. We just did our big SGC reveal on the app. That was my one that came back, a little 10-10 Trout, numbered 15 to 25. I will say, I know some guys hate on Stadium Club Chrome. It's a cheap product. Bang for your buck. I think that might be my favorite product of the year. Stadium Club Chrome is pretty awesome. So I've been a big fan of it. Anyways, a couple quick things I wanted to sound off on and just give some context to. We talked about the Fanatics thing. We talk about it every week. They released the paperwork and kind of redid the contract with the LCS guys last week. And so it was kind of shocking. You can't sell online. You can't break it. You have to advertise for Fanatics. Just a lot of extra rules and different things that came down the pipeline from them to shop owners. That was, again, the initial confusion was everybody thought, well, there's no breakers anymore. That wasn't the case. That was strictly a local card shop, an LCS agreement. It had nothing to do with the breaker pilot program or any of that stuff. But once we figured that out, again, everybody had to be first to rush to get the content out. I will sound off about that later, too, because that annoys me. So many guys now, you don't have to be accurate. You don't have to be entertaining. You don't have to say anything of any real substance. But if you can just be first and spout nonsense, it's like you can be an awesome YouTube sensation. So our YouTube station is small. We're going to try to grow it. And just like almost everything else I've done, that is the reason. Like the podcast, we started the podcast 3 years ago. I guess we'll do a quick history lesson. Then we'll get into this just because it's episode 1. We started the podcast because it was so much garbage content in the podcast field for the hobby. Again, nobody wants to talk to sources. Nobody wants to actually speak to people involved in stories. It's a lot of just conjecture and opinion. And I'm fine with some of that, but that's why we started that, to combat just kind of the nonsense there. YouTube, to me, has kind of become the same. Like, I just see a lot of the YouTube guys lately. And by the way, this is not another thing that irritates the crap out of me, the word sponsored. Everything is sponsored. If you're not sponsored, you hate guys who are sponsored. If you are, then you're a sellout, an enemy, and a scumbag. And that's fine, too. I really don't care. You can think whatever you want about sponsored content. Take it with a grain of salt. Just completely tune people out. However, YouTube started to really become a place I was looking to. We go to YouTube every week just to look for leads on stories we're going to take. Like, honestly, we try to give credit when we take people's stories. Not that we're taking them, but if they're talking about things, there's a couple guys on YouTube I follow pretty closely just because I think either A, they break news, or B, they give pretty unbiased opinions about things, which is very rare nowadays, instead of just the biased nonsense and just people wanting to spout off and make, clicky, catchy statements and be awesome. And so I just thought, this is going to be a thing we're going to do 1 to 2 times a week. It'll be me solo most times. Sometimes we'll have Jesse and or a guest. But for me, it was like, again, even the Fanatic story, that's a perfect example of last week we get partial information, a lot of it out of context, and a lot of it not from people it was affecting anyways. And everybody's thumbnail, podcast title, whatever, was the sky is falling, breakers are done, shops are over, Fanatics is ruining the hobby. Fanatics may ruin the hobby. I have no idea. And I'll tell you this, I'm as plugged into those guys and Panini, Tops, Fanatics, all of them. We have great contacts because of our affiliation with the Ringer at all those places. I have no idea if they're going to be hugely successful or if they're going to totally shatter and destroy the hobby we love. I tend to lean toward it's going to be successful. Billionaires usually continue to make money. I could be naive in thinking that. I could be totally wrong. That's just my 2 cents. But last week was a perfect example. And I told Jesse that was the last time I was going to stay silent about some of it because it just gets old. Like there is just no more reasonableness because everything has become about clicks and being the first to release stuff. So the Fanatics story to me was a perfect example. Well, fast forward a week, we get to this week. The sky's not falling. Breakers are totally unaffected by this, by the way. And card shops got a huge addendum. By the way, I'm just going to scratch my face the whole time, which is going to be good for YouTube. See, I can do this on the podcast. Nobody notices. On camera, my face is blowing up here, so it's great. Allergies in Tennessee are awesome. The addendums that came out, though, by the way, for the Fanatics contract, literally took away almost all the negative people had last week. There is one major catch, though. So you can continue to sell your stuff online. You can continue to break certain products that you get in store. Now, granted, they do want some of your allocation to be sold in the store. I'll be honest, I have no problem with that. If you are a shop owner and you don't do anything to sell product locally in your shop, I don't think you should get product. I know shop owners, some may hate that. I don't think you should be forced to sell it all in your shop, but I also don't think you should be able to just take it all and dump it and flip cases like so many guys, myself included, by the way. I did that also for years. The landscape has changed. I also scoff at the view like, well, how can Fanatics come in and do this? I'll tell you how. They own the license and they produce the product. You don't have to like it, but those are the rules of the game. Like if you make something and you're going to give it to somebody else and continue to supply them, you get to dictate terms. Now, just because Topps and Panini have not done that in the past doesn't mean Fanatics can't do it now going forward. But even that, having said all of that, though, the changes to the contract and local card shop owners started getting notified on Monday of this week. And even we heard from some yesterday. Fanatics had group calls, group Zoom sessions, reached out and called a lot of these shop owners. So now you can sell stuff online. You can still break stuff. We still want you selling stuff in your store. All good news, by the way. The one caveat was no selling wax on eBay. This to me has been a very underplayed part of the story. I think it really is Fanatics kind of putting a line in the sand of, hey, eBay is the most major direct competition they have. Of course, in singles, eBay is still the authority, like them or not. And then eBay Live has some huge partnerships and sponsorships with major breaking names. Like, look at some of the names who have been on eBay Live. I think if Fanatics comes in and says, hey, you can no longer sell our product there, or you won't have accounts, nobody in their right mind is going to keep selling there. However, all things being equal, having considered everything and seen the changes to the contract, the new wording, having spoken, by the way, to card shop owners who were on these calls and to Fanatics contacts, it's a good thing for the hobby. Like, I don't know any other way to say that. And again, now we start to fall into that gray area of, oh, that's just something good happens for Fanatics. Influencers and people are shelling them and all this other stuff. I think that's a lot of crap 9 times out of 10. I just think that is such a misrepresented statement. We are critical of Fanatics, me and Jesse on the podcast, and I will be here as well when it's due. But when they do something like this that I view as a positive for the hobby, I just think it's funny. Everybody jumps on the negative. Then we see good changes that is actually changes that will, in my opinion, positively affect shop owners. I'll be very curious to see if anybody has content about this in the next couple of days. I haven't seen any yet. So that's one. The other thing, and then I'll kind of, by the way, and I will refer to the chat sometimes. I know it's kind of a no-no on YouTube. I don't care. I hate YouTube. I hate being on camera. You guys who know me know that. That's why I don't look at the camera as much because I'm awkward. Eric Smith says it's controlling the shadiness. That's the other thing. Everybody for forever has been calling, man, we need an authority, a regulation of some kind, something to have an overall controlling viewpoint. Well, that is what happens when Fanatics comes in. Again, I'm not saying you got to like it or hate it, but that is what it is now. they're going to control it. And if they don't like the way you operate, they're going to get rid of you. Period. Is that fair? I have a tough time even thinking it's not fair. If me and Jesse go out and do something stupid to bring, reproach on that company and make our brand look bad and in effect make them look bad for supplying us product, how can I be upset? Like if I have, me and Eddie work together, he doesn't work for me, but let's just say the relationship was different. Eddie, Nick, Tim, these guys all worked under our brand. Actually, they do, myself included. Me, Jesse, Eddie, Tim, Nick, all these guys in some capacity work under the SCN umbrella now. Well, if somebody, myself included, by the way, does something stupid, sorry, the brand is more important than the individuals underneath it. You then lose the right to represent that brand. So I really don't have a big issue with Fanatics doing that. Somebody else in the chat mentioned monopolies. Again, monopolies can be good or bad, right? If it's a a well-run monopoly. Now, granted, I always think competition to me is always better. But if we're going to have some kind of a monopoly here, which we are, like, let's not be naive. But if the monopoly stands behind what they say, and again, the jury is still out on Fanatics to me. I've seen some things where I question why they're doing it. I don't agree. I see other things like the announcements this week. I say, great. So I'm very curious about that part. But, I think you can do both. That's the other thing. We live in this world now, and this is such a small niche hobby, niche market still, where you have, 20 voices that are maybe recognizable. A lot of them are on YouTube, by the way. Hats off to you guys. Like the dudes doing video content, there's some good people out there. Garbage too. Like there's plenty of both. But podcast is not, I mean, honestly, there's not a lot of big voices in the podcast, quite frankly. So that's why we wanted to try to spill over here as well. But, both things, that's another thing that's just a universal truth. Almost always in every situation, two things can be true. Like Fanatics can be a monopoly and be good for the hobby. Fanatics could also be terrible and be, and have good qualities at the same time. I just, in my opinion, a lot of these things are not mutually exclusive. Like just because somebody has the money and controls things, it doesn't mean they're necessarily bad. Maybe they are. Like I said, if they turn out to be the evil empire, okay, it is what it is. But I just think we rush to judgment. The other thing, just briefly, and I will give a specific shout out if I'm going to take directly from people. Dan the Card Guy, or Dan the Card Man. I should have got the name exact. It's one of those two. Australian dude. I've spoken to him just very briefly offline, online a couple times through DMs. He's got a YouTube channel. I will say, that's a guy to me that is very reasonable with his takes. And I disagree with a lot of what he says, by the way, but I'm cool doing that with reasonable people because I still think you can do it. So he had a video tonight, which inspires this last little part, and then I'll be done, about, the danger of sponsorships and Fanatics and these other type of things. Very true, right? Sponsorships, when it comes to content creation, can definitely be a dangerous thing. If somebody is sponsored by company A and company A is terrible and doing all these horrendous things and you don't speak out about them, because you're cashing a paycheck, it's garbage. You're totally tainted. Your content has no backing. You're not reliable. But I do think very much it gets played up quite a bit. And I don't think Dan was doing this, by the way. Like I said, I find him to be very reasonable, but I get irritated with the guys. This whole talk of any kind of sponsorship is bad. And then I always hear the next line, though, too. And this is one of the few reasons. And again, this is not related to Dan now. That his video just kind of inspired my line of thinking here. Jesse and I have a number of sponsors. We've had some crap companies that I firmly believed in, by the way. Starstock, Collectible. Now, and I do want to make a separation here. Starstock ended up just being garbage because they took advantage of their customers. So they sponsored the show. We promoted them. We talked up their service. I used their service. To this day, I still think that is an awesome idea. Their execution was garbage. So at the time, we talked it up. As soon as things started going south, well, we cut ties with them. We stopped taking the check. We started blasting them publicly, calling the CEO on. We called him on the podcast at least 10 times live. And then individually, too, everybody who knows us who had trouble getting their cards, we said, contact me and Jesse. Let us reach out for you. It help get people back. And so there are definitely sponsorships that go south. There are other sponsorships, though, that are what they are. SGC, by the way, is one of our biggest, if not our biggest sponsor, me and Jesse. If SGC comes out tomorrow and says, "Hey, we're going up to $50 a card to grade," and they change all these ridiculous things, and it's terrible. Well, one of two things is going to happen for me and Jess. One, we're going to drop them because we can't support what they're doing, or two, we're going to just blast them and keep cashing the checks. But there's no world in which me and Jesse are going to turn a blind eye to something like that, regardless of if it's a sponsor or not. When there's shady crap, me and Jesse are as outspoken about it as always. I will say we are never first. Almost never are we the first to talk about it because I refuse to go on our platform and just start blasting people like that without proof and without actually getting people's points of view. I have a problem with this guy. I'm going to go to this person. What is your perspective of it? Even if it's the person in the wrong. The Mark's Cards thing was a big deal, a year and a half ago. So we called him directly on the podcast and talked to him. But my overall point with this is the sponsorship. I don't even know what to call it. This topic, though, it really does start to get so overplayed to me. And especially the thought that, like, hey, Fanatics is going to come in and just buy up all this content creation. They're going to sponsor all these shows, YouTube, podcasts, whatever, and no one's going to say a bad word about Fanatics. Well, first, Fanatics doesn't have a deal with any content creators that I know of. And there's not that many huge microphones, whether on YouTube or podcasting. They don't have a sponsorship deal with anybody. So this thought that they're just going to control content, if they want to, they just put out their own content. But I just find it disingenuous to say, like, and not even it's not even disingenuous. I just disagree. And this is getting back to the Dan the Cardman thing. Because again, I like him. I hope Dan will join me on here one day. He does YouTube much better than I do, and we want him on the pod too. But it's not just Dan. A number of guys. I like that the way Dan does it because at least it is reasonable. But like that comment right there, though, if you're a breaker and podcaster, they have control. Fish House, they have zero control of our content. None of our sponsors have any content control ever with us. That is in the contract that we present to every person we take a check from. You have no editorial say. You have no content control, period. Now, do I think there are some guys who are in a much smaller, not even smaller, but a much less valuable position that if somebody comes to them with a check, they're going to jump at it? Sure. But guess what? Those guys don't have audiences. So even then, I don't think I don't think there's any world where Fanatics goes out and finds people who don't have a big voice and say, hey, we're going to sponsor your content. I don't think that's going to happen. They're not going to pay for no engagement and no views. And B, if they do that, all of a sudden this obscure no-name content guy is getting a check and shilling for a company, Fanatics, whatever company you want it to be. So if that happens, you didn't have an audience first. Now you've become a shill with a microphone. Now you're going to have an audience? That's not real either. So then the other thought is, okay, the Fanatics will come in and buy these major brands. Jesse and I are by far the biggest podcast voice in this space. Jeff Wilson, Sports Card Radio are probably the two biggest, at least that I know, Card Collector 2 maybe, biggest YouTubers in this space for actual content. I'm not talking breakers. I know Backyard's huge, Daps, all these breakers, but for actual content. I just don't see a world where they go to those guys and buy the content and those guys become shills for the company and they continue to have their voice. Like if you were a shill for somebody like that, I think people lose interest in you. And I just don't think it's anywhere near as widespread as people think it's going to be. I just don't. So, this thought that sponsorship is bad, it can be. I'll be honest, too. The other thing about that, and me and Jesse have talked about this, too, there's not that many people in the game now, in the content game in cards, that make serious money doing this. There really are not. You can count on one hand. Again, I'm not talking breaking money. I'm talking about people who get paid for content. And Jesse's in the chat. Jesse, can you think of more than 5, including us, who get paid like actual quit your job type of money, like a salary? I just can't. I don't think it's there. And as a matter of fact, I know it's not there because the companies we deal with, a lot of these companies have had other sponsorship deals, and it's small, $500 a month. And by the way, I'm not knocking it, right? Like, good on you if you can make good content and get paid anything. There's a lot of guys, by the way, who make great content and don't get paid a dime. And hats off to you too. I don't care. Like, awesome. It just so happens me and Jesse do that as a full time job. Like, this is our job. Jesse left a serious position at Dell to come and do this. He's not leaving that for 20 grand a year. Like, it's just not the real world. But at the same time, there's not all these guys that just have these huge deals. So that whole line of thinking too is just inaccurate. I think a lot of people lie about it. Jesse and I have come across this as well, where content creator A will tell us this company is paying me this much money, and then we talk to the company and they're very candid. We don't pay them anything, or we pay them a couple hundred a month. But it's not this world where, and that goes for even big names. Um, you know, even like Sports Card Investor. Sports Card Investor has a massive, huge thing all over the place. I don't know that Jeff makes a ton of money based strictly on his content. Um, I could be wrong about that. I know he does really well with his app and other things, but I don't think content is like paying it to. Although maybe he does. I don't really know, but he would be one of the few, you know. But again, I think you could pretty well count on your hand the amount of people who make a good living on content. I just don't think that's a real situation though. So this thought that, like, again, big bad wolf Fanatics is going to come in, control content, like, why? There's so many of the big guys who I think would just laugh about that. Um, but that's just, that is what it is. Couple guys, by the way, I'm not ignoring the chat. I know a number of you guys have actually asked about the Nash cards thing. I said what I wanted to say on the pod. I don't want to get into it more. They made their Instagram response to us. Yeah, obviously I came across. I will say I should have done this on the pod today. I would apologize to Chris if he took what I said as personal shots. I was coming after him in a business sense. Personally, he's never done anything to me ever. Well, that's not true. The way he talked down to me that one time, and that's why the deal fell apart. But aside from that, I'm just done with them. We're not going to do business with them. They're not going to do business with us. If he ever wants to speak, he said very plainly he doesn't. I can respect that. I said what I wanted to say. We invited him on the pod in case he wanted to come on and fight about it, argue, whatever. That invitation will always stand. But aside from that, like, do your thing. We'll do our thing. It is what it is, right? Like, guys who know me and have known me for the last 10, 12 years I've been in the game, I think I'm about as transparent as I can be. To a fault at times. We usually reveal too much. There's a lot of other stuff there. I just, at this point, really no reason to get into it. They can do their thing. But yeah, anything that was taken personally, that's on me. I was trying to attack him. Don't get me wrong. I was trying to attack his business. I wasn't trying to attack him personally. And by the way, the guy who was with him on the Instagram Live, Wayne, it's either Wayne or Wade. I feel terrible. I don't remember his name. I've met that guy 3 times, 4 times. Literally the salt of the earth. The nicest person I've ever met in the hobby. He goes out of his way every time I've ever seen him to say hello and be super friendly. He took care of Chris Vernon and his guy out in Memphis because he runs a Memphis store. I have not a bad word in the world to say about that guy. I should have been more clear, though, that I was really just attacking the business and the business side of it. It didn't have anything to do with those two personally, but yeah, it kind of is what it is. But that's it. I've been ranting long enough. Jesse, I told you 10 to 15. He laughed at me. He knew that wasn't going to be the case. So we're going to try to do this 1 or 2 times a week. Like I said, Jesse will join now and again, and that's cool. Other people are going to, like I said, I may extend the invitation to some other people as well at times, because I think there's some guys on here that I would like to see. And actually, you know what I will do? I'm going to end. Jesse, I think I'm going to do this too. At the end of the night, I will kind of just go to the chat because, again, I don't really mind. I actually like to hear people's, the Nash stuff. Are you going to sell everything Dutch auction, though? Has there been any clarity on that? Okay, Eric, that's a good question. I have not heard anything definitive with Fanatics. His question was about, is everything going to be Dutch auction style like Bowman Sapphire was? Topps Chrome came out yesterday, I believe, the pre-sale, but I think it was just set pricing. So I believe we're good there. Like, I don't know that that'll be the case every time. I don't know that it'll always be the Dutch auction. It was a Dutch. It was set pricing or Dutch. But I think you're going to see a mixture of both. Also, by the way, something like Bowman Sapphire was not offered to shops or breakers direct. Eric just said in the chat, by the way, Topps Chrome was set pricing. Bowman was now Topps Chrome, though we can buy direct as breakers and LCS. Bowman Sapphire, we couldn't buy direct, and it was Dutch auction. Again, this kind of goes back to the original thought. I think Fanatics is going to do a little bit of everything at first and see what works. Um, Anthony S. has Fanatics purchased Upper Deck. Anthony, they have not. I don't see any world they do. I don't know what you'd be buying there aside from the license deals on a couple big autographs. Obviously Jordan, LeBron. Although the LeBron exclusivity agreement is now being questioned. I don't know if that's a real thing or not. I'd be very curious about what that is. But as far as them buying Upper Deck, I'm not sure what you'd buy them for. Like, I could see them buying out individual contracts, but I don't really know what Upper Deck does to bring value. Neo said that they have the Marvel license. I'll just be straight with that. I don't know anything near enough about Marvel to know how valuable that license is or isn't. So I don't know, but I'd be very surprised if they bought any. I just don't think they're going to. I think they've bought what they wanted to buy. They got Tops and they got the license deals. We had discussions with them, by the way, about Card Shop Live before Fanatics Live was announced, and their thought even there was, hey, we're not gonna buy. Obviously, Card Shop Live is tiny, but we're not going to buy that drip loop. We're going to build what we want from the ground up. I think they're going to do that with a lot of things going forward. I think obviously you had to come in and buy something. Like, you had to come in and buy the Tops to get your foot in the door and be ready to run. But aside from that, I'm not sure that there's a ton of value in. I guess and again, that's a $40 billion IPO when it comes out. I think just the age old question there when it comes to anything in business. If I can buy it for X or I can build it for a fraction, And another thing with Fanatics that people, I think, don't really keep in mind with some of this is this is the first time, in my opinion, we're going to see things in for the long haul. Like, they're in this for the long game because they have 20-year agreements. They can't come in and overproduce and make a junk wax era 2.0, which I don't think they will, because then you ruin it for the next, 19 years just to make a quick buck. I don't think a $40 billion company is trying to come in and do that. I think they're trying to come in and legitimately grow the hobby. Like anything else, though, as things grow, like if this thing really does 3 to 5x over the next 5 years, a lot of people are going to get left behind or not like the direction of it and fade away. That's just kind of how it goes, right? Like, that's happened with the wax game. I mean, dude, when breaking really took off and became a major thing, all of a sudden box pricing went up. And again, I've always said that and I stand by it. Chicken or the egg with breaking. Box pricing went up or breakers came in, and that's why it raised. What came first, whatever. But either way, it affected wax pricing and wax sales. And a lot of guys just said, hey, we're not going to deal with it. We're done. I guess that's to me, I just think that's what we'll see going forward. Like, I think they are going to just change things. And certain fractions of the hobby will decide, hey, we don't want to be in this. The great thing about the hobby, though, is if you don't like the direction of the new, like, I'm a 90s insert guy. I'll break new wax because I break for, as a part-time job still. And there's some product I like to rip for myself. But if I don't like the direction of the new, cool. Like, nothing that's going to happen in the next 5 years is going to change whether I can go out and buy a Ken Griffey Jr. 93 Finest Refractor or not. So there's still, like, I can still enjoy the avenues of the hobby I want to enjoy. So let me grab a couple other questions real quick. My buddy Min, any thoughts on Panini releasing Bryce, Stroud, etc. autos this past week? Does this mean they're not Fanatics exclusive? I will say this was interesting to me. They released them and they're all sticker autos. I have been told that 3 of the 4 big quarterbacks are Fanatics exclusive going forward. So I don't think you're going to see those guys on card on any Panini product this year. Me and Jesse have heard, differing opinions from both sides of the aisle. My personal opinion is they had a surplus from some of the initial early products that they signed because they're still going to be, Chronicles Draft, Prism Draft, all those draft products are going to have their autos. But I think it was the Instant or the Panini Now, whatever they're called. Those were the first pro uniform autos, and they had stickers on them. So I think you're going to see that in a couple maybe, but I don't think we're going to see anything on card. And eventually I think those stickers run out, quite frankly. So, which, by the way, horrible for the hobby. Like, this is one of the most anticipated rookie classes in a while. It's hard to say that 2020, 2021 were ridiculous, but it was going to be way more anticipated than 2022, way more hobby hype. And so if you have 3 of those 4, that hurts the hobby. period, right? Like it just doesn't help if guys can't go out and buy a box of Panini whatever and get those. Um, Same way with Wembanyama. I don't think Victor's going to be signing in anything Panini this year. I would bet money on that. I don't think that's good for the hobby, right? Like great for Fanatics. I don't think it helps the hobby this year because a lot of guys go out and buy Panini because they want licensed, team logo autographs. So I think that hurts them for sure. Um, Wilmette Trading Company. How many products are not viable without breaking? Yeah, and he mentions high end, immaculate, impeccable, limited, NT. They can't all survive. No question. Like, yeah, that is the nature of the beast. Like the price point on some of those wax products now is so high that most guys are just totally priced out. Most guys, quite frankly, are totally priced out of breaks on those things too at this point because a lot of those not only are they expensive, it's like one and done type stuff. Immaculate has 6, 8 cards a box. You don't hit a big chase card, you're done. That's why, like to me, Bowman is still the most viable breaking product because you can buy the Diamondbacks in 2023 Bowman Jumbo for $500, not hit a Drew Jones auto, and still grade and kind of maneuver your way to not losing all your money. Like you can still make something back. A lot of those other ones, though, to me are just super high risk, high reward things, and I think it's tough. Steck asks, does Bedard put hockey on the card map for you at all? For me, it doesn't because I don't care about the sport, but a lot of guys it does. Like the way he's talked about is almost Wembanyama type hype. Not quite to that level, and obviously hockey is not on that level as the same level as basketball, but it seems like it's going to, invigorate the hockey market a little bit, which is great. Like I'd love to see. To me, it's all good. Like anything that could happen, I think is a good thing for hockey. And it seems like that's the type of kid who could come in and really invigorate the hobby for them some, which would be great. So um, there you go. All right, last question too. Jeff asked, how big do you think the National will be this year? And somebody else asked, is the National worth going to? We talked about this on the podcast as well. Again, the podcast, by the way, if I haven't mentioned, Sports Cards Nonsense, same name as this. I think the National, if you can afford to go, is phenomenal. Uh, I think it's awesome. Like to me, the National is just a great event. Yes, there are plenty of overpriced dealers and donkeys who are just charging way too much. There's a ton of guys who are there to legitimately move stuff because they know they've got to pay for their trip and make it profitable and be worth it. So I've always had good success. It takes some patience. It's a massive place. The place in Rosemont, the Donald Lee Stevens Convention Center is, you know, Jesse's been there. He can attest to the fact if you were to spend a minute at every table, it's a day and a half to get through, or a full day at the very least, to just walk through and see every table. So yeah, it's a major, major thing. But if you can go, to me, you go. But anyways, that's it. Like I said, this is going to be episode 1. We're going to call this dumb thing. I told Jesse I want to get the logo instead of TED Talks, just GIO, the word TED crossed out, Talks. So Sports Boy, if you can make that logo happen for our thumbnail, I would be indebted to you. But yeah, anyways, like I said, we're going to do it once or twice a week. Appreciate you guys tuning in. I think we'll get up to 60, 70 viewers. I'll be honest, guys, our YouTube numbers stink. I'm amazed to see we got that many. So I really appreciate you guys coming in. We'll try to do this a couple times a week, and I'll do that every time. If there's people in the chat, we'll do the live questions at the end, and we'll spruce it up a little bit too. We'll try to get the StreamYard going in case people want to come in and join. We'll get the comments posted up on the screen like some other guys do, because a lot of these guys do good content and have the thing down. This was obviously just a test run for me. So there you go, episode 1. Appreciate you guys tuning in. What are you supposed to say? Crush the like button, subscribe, and listen, and do all that nonsense. This shirt's dominating. Palm trees, Daniel Brown. Watch your mouth. Can't beat a palm tree. I have to figure out how to end the stream, Jesse. I'm going to call you in a minute as soon as I hit the red button. We'll see you guys next week. So Monday, we've got Nate Burns on the podcast. Nate Burns from Grand Slam Collectibles. I think next Thursday, we're going to have Rich Layton, I believe. So we got some cool guests coming up. I'm going to go actually, I got to go live now. Exactly. Steck, I got to go live on Card Shop right now. The Bowman Mixer's full. So I'll catch you guys over there. Goodbye.